So let's go ahead and get started. So,
Dawson's Rambles.
hey YouTube, Dawson Ryder here, and welcome to my video that is going to be my idea for a King-ohger adaptation. I went ahead and jumped the gun and did Boom Boonger first for a first idea, and I will revisit that series again later, just because I was so excited about the idea. But I've been kind of working in the background on this idea for my King-ohger adaptation all year long, and I thought about posting the video a couple different times, but then like they would introduce something in King-ohger and I'd be like, oh, I would incorporate that. And every time it just didn't seem like a good point where they just kept introducing stuff or it seemed like they might. So I decided, you know what, let's just wait till the end so I can incorporate everything I want to incorporate. So, a couple things at the beginning. Number one, this is just for fun. I saw a couple comments, like a half dozen comments on my last video that was like, you know they're not doing adaptions anymore, right? I'm like, I know, I'm in full support of that. This is just for fun. Like, this isn't an announcement video, like this isn't a news video. Like, you got that, right? It's important to me, you understand that. The other thing is, obviously this series, King-ohger, includes a Kyoryuger crossover. I'm not necessarily sure I would want to include that, just because you know how I am about the crossover stuff. But I will talk about, at the very end, how I would incorporate it into this, because the way I would incorporate it would technically enhance an element of it, but it's not something that if I don't use it, it impacts the story I would be telling overall. But I figured, while I'm here, might as well talk about it. Setting the stage of the King-ohger world, I am loosely borrowing some elements. The King-ohger world is in an alternate dimension from the main dimension. Kind of like with Boom Boonger, I'm exploring elements of how other worlds discovered the morphing grid. So this is an alternate universe, alternate Earth. It's not even Earth, it's like Terra. I'm not going to have any connections to this planet in like a prime Earth. It's like an alternate planet in an alternate dimension that just happens to have humans on it, like KO35. And we kind of follow the history of their culture, of like the humans that live on the planet and what effectively is the Bugnaroks. I didn't give them an English name because I don't care about it. I'm just calling them the Bugnaroks. And you know, it was a situation where they fought on and off for years. For the most part, the humans were on the run from them because the Bugnarok are obviously big scary monsters. But at some point, their greatest like alchemists, scientists, or whatever discovered the morphing grid, leading to their first transformation of the 5 warriors that would guard them, transforming into what's effectively their first Power Rangers. But it would take on a much more kind of archaic look, kind of like Mystic Knights, or that cool like archaic armor they introduced in the Draken New Dawn comic. And that would be the first transformation. And then there would be kind of on and off battles between the humans and the Bugnarok as they slowly started to learn how to use the grid. And basically the idea is over time, the armor would evolve from this kind of more medieval looking thing to what we see for the King-ohgers. And eventually, they would defeat the Bugnarok. The Bugnarok would be squashed like bugs. Ah, thank you. And then their societies would sprawl, you know, much like the King-ohger world. That would be very insect-based because like this planet isn't inhabited by insect-like creatures, kind of like our Earth has animals. I mean, maybe they have regular animals, who cares, it's not important to the story. But the idea is you would go into the woods and see like a giant beetle creature or something. So they're kind of alien-esque versions of our bugs, and that's why you have them as part of their culture and imagery and what they base the suits off of. And you would have the 5 kingdoms, and over, you know, the course of hundreds of years, their technology would advance leaps and bounds because they discovered how to use the morphing grid in every facet of their society. And then over time, because the war is no longer, they haven't needed to fight. So the ranger suits have just become status symbols for the kings and queens that they've transformed into for ceremonies and stuff like that. And they're not really fighters. They're just used as, hey, I'm the ruler of this kingdom. This is like a coronation ceremony or a, you know, bug day celebration or whatever. We're going to transform and show off. So that's the setup for that world. Now we're entering our point of view character, which is in another dimension. He's in another dimension where Power Rangers are very much what we know them to be. You know, the heroes of the universe, a known entity and all that type of stuff. Obviously, if I include the Dino Charge stuff, spoiler alert, it would be from the Dino Charge Earth. But for the sake of this, for the sake of the core story, it doesn't matter. It's just a universe where Power Rangers are known. Could be the Prime one, could be Dino Charge, could be any universe. But we're following this other ranger wearing a costume that has absolutely nothing to do with the King-ohgers. I'm just going to use the Dimension X Ranger costume for Casey for pictures because I think that's cool. But it doesn't matter. He's just unrelated. And he's in a spaceship on the run from these villainous spaceships. Very good talking there, Dawson. He's on the run. He's trying to kind of lose them in this cosmic-y, big cosmic-y storm thing. Kind of like when Mark Wahlberg wound up in the future alternate planet thing in Planet of the Apes 2001, which is super underrated, by the way. But anyway, he's trying to lose him in the storm. He winds up portaling through a wormhole, bringing him to the King-ohger Earth, where in the process his he barely makes it. His ship is shredded. A buddy of mine saw Kylo Ren in the shower. He said that he had an 8-pack. The Kylo Ren is shredded. His ship is shredded, and did I say shrimp? It's like shrimp, ship, shrimp. A ship full of shrimp. He was transporting shrimp. That's the new story. His ship is shredded. That's hard to say. And his morpher is basically destroyed. And so then he's stuck on this world and he's observing like what the hell, like there are these basically status symbols and stuff like that. And he winds up meeting this young kid about 16 years old that is kind of a secondary character in the series that would kind of be his intro to the world and helps him out and gives him shelter and teaches him about the world and stuff like that. And then eventually, you know, you have maybe a little bit of time pass where he's kind of been there for a little bit. And then the Bugnarok return. The Bugnarok return and they're attacking, and basically the Rangers have no idea what to do. You know, they're like, well, they don't know how to fight because they've never had to fight before. And the idea is, of course, this veteran Ranger from another dimension is going to be the one to show them. He's like, this is what Power Rangers are in my world. Let me show you how to fight and what Power Rangers are, quote unquote, supposed to be. Or more like what they are in my world so I can help you fight. And he's going to be mentoring them. And before we get to that, because there's some elements to that, there's the whole element of, so if there's 5 Rangers, who the hell is this guy? So the idea is Red Ranger doesn't want anything to do with this. The other 4 are like, oh yes, please help us, totally man, totally help us. But Red Ranger's totally against it. He doesn't want to work with them, vehemently against it. And why is that? This was actually the Red Ranger's plan. Red Ranger is the villain of the first arc. And basically, he secretly had been training and knew how to fight. And he's the one that brought the Bugnarok back. They hadn't like secretly survived all along. He used technology to revive them and they're kind of under his control. And he was gonna syndrome it. And he was going to stage an attack, and the other Rangers were going to be helpless, and Red Ranger was going to be the hero and use it to sort of make a political move to unite all the kingdoms and have him be ruler of all of them. But then this Ranger X guy shows up and is like, screws the whole thing up. So he's against it completely and kind of walls himself off and doesn't know what to do when basically his syndrome moment is stolen. And so in order to help them, the Rangers say like, hey, there's this prototype for the current Red Ranger suit. Why don't you take it and help lead us? So our main Ranger here, our point of view character, takes up the Okuagata Gray Ranger mantle. And that's kind of the core team lineup at first, is instead of having the Red Ranger at the center, you have the Gray Ranger. And Red Ranger is kind of a villain. Obviously, only the audience would know it eventually, but he's just kind of this weird X factor for a while. Let's put that aside for a second and talk about the mentoring of the Rangers, because that would be a major thing in changing the kingdoms. And the idea would be that not all the Rangers would be receptive to the training. I would have it so that like 2 of them were, and they were like totally getting better at fighting and found a calling in protecting their people, but the other 2, it just wasn't for them. Let's say, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. Black and yellow, doesn't matter. So let's say Black Ranger it just doesn't take. It just doesn't take, like he just can't do it, it's just not for him, it doesn't click with him. And then let's say Yellow is able to fight, but she just doesn't like fighting. She just doesn't like fighting. So the idea would be they would then choose a champion. You know, one of them, I think, like let's say Black would choose their most loyal knight that's always been their protector to take up the mantle of the Black Ranger, and Yellow would hold maybe like a competition or something. And the idea would be eventually in the future they would change society so that it wouldn't always be the king that would be the Ranger. It would be whoever is best suited to be the Ranger. Now, the King and Queen that give up their powers would still be regular characters, but you would have a team that was a mix of royalty and non-royalty, and then down the line they would change society so that you would have 2 separate things, a King and a Ranger, although sometimes the King or Queen would be a Ranger. It just depends, whoever's best for the job. So that was kind of an important thematic element. Also, something important to note, which you might guess why, the 16-year-old kid's been training with them all this time as well, and is kind of a regular ally to them. Now, so about a quarter of the way in, though, Red Ranger manages to reform his plans, and he effectively stages it to make it look like our Ranger X, Okuagata Ohsama, was the one that had that plan, because he arrived not too far off from when the Bugsters did. So he then frames it as this guy came back, he brought the Bugsters back to make himself seem like a hero, and then he very publicly defeats him, because kind of in the background, when our Ranger X guy is training everybody, Red Ranger's been working on all this as a way to form him as the hero and frame this guy, and he's also been working on the tech for the armor power-up. So he defeats our leader Ranger, basically destroys or severely damages the Gray Ranger powers, and then basically society sees it as this guy saved us from this dude that was trying to lead us astray, and he's like, I will lead us to defeat the Bugnarok that have been revived. But then, of course, the other 4 Rangers know the truth. They know the truth. I don't know why I went to Gilman there for a second. Takatorman, bread! So they have to kind of play along, but in the background, they are creating a new Ranger power for our main character. They're using leftover pieces from his morpher as well as their own tech to make him his own Ranger suit so that he can make a comeback. And he does indeed make a comeback, this time now taking up the mantle of Spider Kimonos, leading the team as the White Ranger against the remnant of the Bugnarok and our villainous Red Ranger. And the idea is, in the final showdown, he would defeat the Red Ranger and everyone would find out what he had done. He's jailed kind of like Rackley's. But in the while, the main Bugnarok has run out of the control of the Red Ranger. Like, he's been controlling them the whole time, but the main Bugnarok has broken free of whatever he uses to keep them under control and runs wild, and the last of the Bugnarok are attacking the city. And the idea is like, oh man, we gotta make this big mecha formation, but we need like as many people as possible to pilot it, kind of like in King-ohger, although you wouldn't get a bunch of the citizens. And so the idea is then, the 16-year-old kid that had been training alongside them morphs into the Red Ranger to join them. They defeat the Bugnarok. Everything's happy. So this then effectively would be the end of Season 1. Very similar to King-ohger. I would split it up into 2 main arcs. Kind of multiple arcs, because you have like the first quarter, which is when his Grey Ranger powers are destroyed, and then the second quarter, but this is like the first part. And so the idea is everything's happy. They establish that new system of like, hey, it's always going to be the best person qualified rather than a king. They decide to let the kid keep the Red Ranger powers on a trial basis, but eventually there will be like a test to see who's best to keep these powers. The idea is things are a little peaceful for a while, couple months, and then a portal opens up, presumably back to our Ranger X's dimension. And even though he's found a new home here, there's a big fight going on with the people that were chasing him. He's got to go back. So you end Season 1, and it would very much feel like a series finale. The day is saved, he's helped change their society, he's returned home, boom. Enter Season 2, about a 5-year time jump, give or take. You open up with the kingdoms, everything's been going really well. That young kid has continued to be the Red Ranger, proved himself now that he's about 20, 21, but, the kingdom has a new leader, he's not the new leader. Everything's going fine and dandy there. But then all of a sudden, you get a series of giant wormholes that show up into this world, and it's basically fleets of this enemy that our Ranger X was fighting, which, as you can tell, is going to be Doug's dead forces. And what you reveal is, when he was originally being chased into this planet, he was being chased by the equivalent of Kame Jim, who we didn't think made it through the portal with him, but it turns out he did. He actually landed on the King-ohger Earth at the same time as our Ranger X. And during the entirety of the events of the original storyline, he was watching and observing this world while also secretly gathering resources to open a portal back. And so that's why that portal opened. It didn't just randomly open so he could go home. Kame Jim had opened a portal so that he could go home and report back to his boss. And so he was able to go back. And when he went back to his boss, he's like, hey boss, there's this alternate world with this amazing next level morphin grid technology that's far and away most things in this universe. We should go there, conquer it, add it to our empire, then bring all the tech back and continue to conquer even more in this universe and beyond. Buzz Lightyear it. So, this force is now invaded. Of course, then our White Ranger comes back and he's like, oh my god, I led this here, I'm so sorry. Maybe there'd be a little drama about a couple Rangers blaming him, but it really wasn't his fault. But anyway, the idea is then they have to now face this new threat altogether. The team reunites to face off against the invading force. Now, our Red Ranger, evil Red Ranger, who has been in jail, eventually at one point escapes, and he kind of hobbles together the remnants of the old Grey Ranger powers and what he has now stolen back, his crown. He steals back the crown power-up and kind of forges them together into a new power-up, which is the Silver Okuagata Ranger power-up, and he is basically another reoccurring villain in the series. He would kind of be a wild card out for his own goals, but then he would sometimes work with the other villains, and they would eventually make an alliance where they're like, if you help us, basically, we just want to mine this place for resources and be able to use it for our other conquering, but if you help us, we'll let you rule the whole planet. You'll basically be our guy, and you can rule this planet. All you got to do is make sure that we get these resources. And so he would eventually align himself with them. Now, for this half, I don't have an enormous amount of details and various storylines. I'm sure if I really had to do this, I'd come up with a bunch of interesting little storylines for all the generals and the characters. But the general idea here is just these 6 Rangers against this armada, and of course, they would eventually win. I think I would have it, though, that Kame Jim would eventually betray Doug Dead, and he would be the one to take him out, like very unexpectedly, like a quarter of the way before the series was done, he would just murder Doug's Dead. or in Power Rangers terms, destroy him, and he would try to take over everything. But eventually, the Rangers would win out, and the day would be saved. And then I think that there would be kind of a call to action for at least some of the Rangers to go back to the main dimension Ranger X is from and liberate the remaining planets. Because the idea is the core leadership has been destroyed here on this Earth, not Earth, this world. But obviously he still has legions in the main universe that he comes from that are still attacking. So the idea was kind of similar to King-ohger, where they take off. They're going to take off to go help liberate the remaining planets. Not all of them, some of them, because some got to stay and rule or whatever. So, last thing, how I would incorporate the King-ohger crossover. So again, if I had to incorporate it, I would have our mysterious Ranger X, who becomes kind of our leader, be the one to play the Build theme song. That was Build theme song, right? I don't listen to a lot of the theme songs, so I'm surprised that popped into my head. The idea would be the dimension he comes from is the Dino Charge dimension. Now, it doesn't necessarily matter. This could be Tyler. It could be Tyler's son, Tyler's grandson. What if it was his son and he was looking for his dad? Oh my god. That would be hilarious. I would almost do that just for the bit. Dino Charge, the sequel. Daddy wasn't there. Again. It doesn't really matter. It could be Tyler. It could be his son, grandson. Could just be the next person to become Dino Charge Red, not related to Tyler at all. But it would be from the Dino Charge dimension, and the idea would be the Dino Charge team along with this Ranger would be one of the many teams fighting. And so maybe the idea is, it's not really post-apocalyptic over there, but it's definitely they're under war in the main dimension where he comes from. So there would be like non-traditional Ranger teams and partners. So the idea is when our Spider Ranger goes back to his main world, his partner was sort of the Dino Charge Red Ranger, and he was able to share his new technology with his friends, which resulted in the upgraded Dino Charged Red suit. And so that's why that would look different. And if I had to incorporate it, that would be the story. When he returned to the Insect Earth to help them fight off the Armada, he would return with his partner, this enhanced Red Ranger by the tech he had, and he would actually be a regular Ranger character. You might as well. He would be a regular character in the series. And then at the end of the series, they would be like, okay, let's go liberate the rest of the world. And then you'd maybe have like a post-series team-up story where they would all team up and destroy the rest of the Empire in the main dimension. And I would give all the Dino Charge Rangers, at least all the core 5, 6, an enhanced power-up, and then maybe make those cool new team-up power-ups this final shared technology for the final battle. So yeah, that's my idea. I had fun making it. I thought it was some interesting stuff in there. It definitely is a series that could have a lot of different possible avenues, and it's fun to think about. And as I said before, I will do other videos for the ones I've skipped. I know I haven't done King-ohger yet. Did I do King-ohger? I haven't done King-ohger yet. And I wouldn't even mind going back and doing some of the Showa ones in the concept of it maybe being an animated series or something like that. But let me know what you think of this idea, guys. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.